Cell, Part 5, Kent Pond. 1. His old house, the house where Johnny and Sharon had lived at the time of the pulse, was on Livery Lane, 2 blocks north of the dead traffic light that marked the center of Kent Pond. It was the sort of place some real estate ads called a fixer-upper and some a starter home. Clay and Sharon's joke before the separation was that their starter home would probably also be their retirement home. And when she'd gotten pregnant, they had talked about naming the baby Olivia, if it turned out to be of what Sharon called the feminine persuasion. Then, she said, they'd have the only Livy of Livery Lane. How they had laughed. Clay, Tom, and Jordan, a pallid Jordan, a thoughtfully silent Jordan who now usually responded to questions only if asked a second or even a third time, arrived at the intersection of Main and Livery at just past midnight on a windy night during the second week of October. Clay stared wildly at the stop sign on the corner of his old street, where he had come as a visitor for the last 4 months. Nuclear power was still stenciled there in spray paint, as it had been before he left for Boston. Stop nuclear power. Stop nuclear power. He couldn't seem to get the sense of it. It wasn't a question of meaning, that was clear enough, just someone's clever little political statement, parentheses. If he looked, he'd probably find the same thing on stop signs all over town. Maybe in Springvale and Acton, too, close parentheses. But the sense of how this could be the same when the whole world had changed, that eluded him. Clay felt somehow that if he stared at stop nuclear power with enough desperate intensity, a wormhole would open, some kind of sci-fi time tunnel, and he'd dive into the past, and all this would be undone. All this darkness. Clay, Tom asked, you all right? This is my street, Clay said, as if that explained everything, and then, without knowing he was going to do it, he began to run. Livery Lane was a cul-de-sac, all the streets on this side of town dead-ending against the flank of Kent's Hill, which is really an eroded mountain. Oaks overhung it, and the street was full of dead leaves that crackled under his feet. There were also a lot of stalled cars, and 2 that were locked grill to grill in a strenuous mechanical kiss. "Where's he going?" Jordan called behind him. Clay hated the fear he heard in Jordan's voice, but he couldn't stop. "He's all right," Tom said. "Let him go." Clay wove around the stalled cars, the beam of his flashlight jigging and stabbing in front of him. One of the stabs caught Mr. Krutsky's face. Mr. Krutsky always used to have a Tootsie Pop for Johnny on haircut day, when Johnny was Johnny G, just a little guy who used to yell, "Fo-fo me," when the phone rang. Mr. Krutsky was lying on the sidewalk in front of his house, half buried in fallen oak leaves, and his nose appeared to be gone. I mustn't find them dead. This thought drummed in his mind over and over, not after Alice. I mustn't find them dead. And then hatefully, parentheses, but in moments of stress, the mind almost always told the truth, close parentheses. And if I have to find one of them dead, let it be her. Their house was the last one on the left, parentheses, as he always used to remind Sharon, with a suitably creepy laugh, long after the joke had worn thin, actually, close parentheses. And the driveway slanted up to the refurbished little shed that was just big enough to park 1 car. Clay was already out of breath, but he didn't slow. He sprinted up the driveway, kicking leaves in front of him, feeling the ditch starting to sink in high up on his right side, tasting copper in the back of his mouth where his breathing seemed to rasp. He lifted his flashlight and shined it into the garage. Empty. Question was that good or bad? He turned around, saw Tom's and Jordan's lights bobbing toward him down below, and shone his own on his back door. His heart leaped into the back of his throat at what he saw. He ran up the 3 steps to the stoop, stumbled, and almost put his hand through the storm door, pulling the note off the glass. It was held by only a corner of Scotch tape. If they'd come along an hour later, maybe even half an hour, the restless night wind would have blown it over the hills and far away. He could kill her for not taking more pains. Such carelessness was just so Sharon, but at least the note wasn't from his wife. 2. Jordan came up the driveway and stood at the foot of the steps with his light trained on Clay. Tom came toiling along behind, breathing hard and making an enormous crackling sound as he scuffed through the leaves. He stopped beside Jordan and put his own light on the scrap of unfolded paper in Clay's hand. He raised the beam slowly to Clay's thunderstruck face. "I forgot about her mother's fucking diabetes," Clay said, and handed over the note that had been Scotch taped to the door. Tom and Jordan read it together. "Daddy, something bad happened, as you probably know. I hope you're all right, and get this. Mitch Steinman and George Gendron are with me. People are going crazy, and we think it's the cell phones. Dad, here is the bad part. We came here because I was afraid I was going to break mine if I was wrong, but I wasn't wrong. It was gone. Mom has been taking it because, Nana is sick, and she wanted to keep checking. I gotta go. Jesus, I'm scared. Somebody killed Mr. Kretzky. All kinds of people are dead and nuts like in a horror movie. But we heard people are getting together, normal people, at the town hall, and that's where we are going. Maybe Mom is there, but Jesus, she had my phone. Daddy, if you get here okay, please come get me. Your son, John Gavin Riddell." Tom finished, then spoke in a tone of kindly caution that terrified Clay more thoroughly than the most dire warning could have done. "You know that any people who gathered at the town hall have probably gone many different ways, don't you? It's been 10 days and the world has undergone a terrible convulsion. "I know," Clay said. His eyes were stinging and he could feel his voice beginning to waver. "And I know his mother is probably..." He shrugged and flung an unsteady hand at the dark, sloping away world beyond his leaf-strewn driveway. "But Tom, I have to go to town hall and see. They may have left word. He may have left word." "Yes," Tom said, "of course you do, and when we get there, we can decide what comes next." He spoke in that same tone of awful kindness. Clay almost wished he'd laugh and say something like, "Come on, you poor sap. You don't really think you're gonna see him again, do you? Get fucking real." Jordan had read the note a second time, maybe a third and fourth. Even in his current state of horror and grief, Clay felt like apologizing to Jordan for Johnny's poor spelling and composition skills, reminding Jordan that his son must have written under terrible stress, crouched on the stoop scribbling, while his friend stood watching chaos swirl below. Now Jordan lowered the note and said, "What does your son look like?" Clay almost asked why, then decided he didn't want to know, at least not yet. "Johnny's almost a foot shorter than you, stocky, dark brown hair. Not skinny, not blonde. No, that sounds like his friend George." And Jordan and Tom exchanged a look. It was a grave look, but Clay thought there was relief in it too. "What?" he asked. "What? Tell me." "The other side of the street," Tom said. "You didn't see because you were running. There's a dead boy about 3 houses down. Skinny, blonde, red backpack. That's George Gendron, Clay said. He knew George's red backpack as well as he knew Johnny's blue one with the strips of reflecting tape on it. He and Johnny made a Puritan village together for their 4th grade history project. They got an A+. George can't be dead. But he almost certainly was. Clay sat down on the stoop, which gave its old familiar creak under his weight, and put his face in his hands. 3. The town hall was at the intersection of Pond and Mill Streets, in front of the town common and the body of water that gave the little village its name. The parking lot was almost empty except for the spaces reserved for employees because both streets leading to the big white Victorian building were jammed with stalled vehicles. People had gotten as close as they could, then walked the rest of the way. For latecomers like Clay, Tom, and Jordan, it was a slow slog. Within 2 blocks of the town hall, not even the lawns were free of cars. Half a dozen houses had burned down. Some were still smoldering. Clay had covered the body of the boy on Livery Lane. It had indeed been Johnny's friend George. But they could do nothing for the scores of swollen and putrefying dead they encountered as they made their slow way toward the Kent Pond Town Hall. There were hundreds, but in the dark, Clay saw none that he recognized. That might have been true even in daylight. The Crows had put in a busy week and a half. His mind kept going back to George Gendron, who had been lying face down in a clot of bloody leaves. In his note, John had said that George and Mitch, his other good friend this year in the 7th grade, had been with him. So whatever had happened to George must have happened after Johnny taped that note to the storm door. And the 3 of them left the Riddell house. And since only George had been in those bloody leaves, Clay could assume Johnny and Mitch had gotten off Livery Lane alive. Of course, assume makes an ass out of you and me, he thought. The gospel, according to Alex Maxwell, may she rest in peace. And it was true. George's killer might have chased them and gotten them somewhere else, on Main Street or Dugway Street, maybe neighboring Laurel Way, stabbed them with a Swedish butcher knife or a couple of car aerials. They had reached the edge of the town hall parking lot. On their left was a pickup truck that had tried to reach it overland and wound up mired in a boggy ditch less than 5 yards from an acre of civilized and largely deserted asphalt. On their right was a woman with her throat torn out and her features pecked away to black holes and bloody ribbons by the birds. She was still wearing her Portland Sea Dogs baseball cap, and her purse was still over her arm. Killers weren't interested in money anymore. Tom put a hand on his shoulder, startling him. Stop thinking about what might have happened. How did you know? It doesn't take a mind reader. If you find your son, you probably won't, but if you do, I'm sure he'll tell you the whole story. Otherwise, doesn't matter. No, of course not. But Tom, I knew George Gendron. The kids used to call him Connecticut sometimes because his family moved from there. He ate hot dogs and hamburgers in our backyard. His dad used to come over and watch the Patriots with me. I know, Tom said, I know. And to Jordan, sharply, stop looking at her, Jordan. She's not going to get up and walk. Jordan ignored him and kept staring at the crow-picked corpse in the Sea Dog's hat. The phoners started trying to take care of their own as soon as they got back to some base-level programming, he said. even if it was only fishing them out from under the bleachers and throwing them into the marsh. They tried to do something, but they don't take care of ours. They leave ours to rot where they fell. He turned to face Clay and Tom. No matter what they say or what they promise, we can't trust them, he said fiercely. We can't, okay? I'm totally down with that, Tom said. Clay nodded. Me too. Tom tipped his head toward the town hall, where a few emergency lights with long-life batteries still shone, casting a sickly yellow glow on the employees' cars, which now stood in drifts of leaves. Let's go in there and see what they left behind. Yes, let's do it, Clay said. Johnny would be gone, he had no doubt of that, but some small part of him, some small, childish, never-say-die part, still continued to hope that he would hear a cry of, Daddy! And his son would spring into his arms, a living thing, real weight, in the midst of this nightmare. 4. They knew for sure the town hall was deserted when they saw what had been painted across the double doors. In the fading glow of the battery-powered emergency lights, the large, sloppy strokes of red paint looked like more dried blood. Kashwak equals Nofo. How far away is this Kashwak place? Tom asked. Clay thought about it. I'd say 80 miles, almost due north. You'd take Route 160 most of the way, but once you get on the TR, I don't know. Jordan asked, what exactly is a TR? TR-90's an unincorporated township. There are a couple of little villages, some quarries, and a 2-bit Micmac res up north, but mostly it's just woods, bear, and deer. Clay tried the door, and it opened to his hand. I'm going to check this place out. You guys really don't have to come if you don't want to. You can be excused. No, we'll come, Tom said. Won't we, Jordan? Sure. Jordan sighed, like a boy confronted with what may be a difficult chore. Then he smiled. Hey, electric lights. Who knows when we'll get to see them again? 5. No Johnny Riddell came hurtling out of a dark room to throw himself into his father's arms. But the town hall was still redolent of the cooking that had been done on gas grills and hibachis by the people who'd gathered here, following the pulse. Outside the big main room on the long bulletin board where notices of town business and upcoming events usually hung, perhaps 200 notes had been posted. Clay, so tense he was nearly panting, began to study these with the intensity of a scholar who believes he may have found the lost gospel of Mary Magdalene. He was afraid of what he might find and terrified of what he might not. Tom and Jordan retreated tactfully to the main meeting room, which was still littered with the remains of the refugees, who had apparently spent several nights here, waiting for a rescue that had never come. In the posted notes, Clay saw the survivors had come to believe that they could hope for more than rescue. They believed that salvation awaited them in Kashwak. Why that particular townlet, when probably all of TR-90, parentheses, certainly the northern and western quadrants, close parentheses, was dead to cell phone transmission and reception? The notes on the bulletin board weren't clear on that. Most seemed to assume that any readers would understand without needing to be told. It was a case of everybody knows everybody goes. And even the clearest of the correspondents had obviously been struggling to keep terror and elation balanced and under control. Most messages amounted to little more than follow the yellow brick road to Kashwak and salvation as soon as you can. 3/4 of the way down the board, half hidden by a note from Iris Nolan, a lady Clay knew quite well. Parentheses, she volunteered at the tiny town library, close parentheses. He saw a sheet with his son's familiar looping scrawl and thought, oh, dear God, thank you so much. He pulled it off the board, being careful not to tear it. This note was dated October 3. Clay tried to remember where he had been on the night of October 3 and couldn't quite do it. Had it been the barn in North Reading or the Sweet Valley Inn near Methuen? He thought the barn, but he couldn't be absolutely certain. It all ran together, and if he thought too hard about it, it began to seem that the man with the flashlights on the sides of his head had also been the young man jabbing the car aerials, that Mr. Riccardi had killed himself by gobbling broken glass instead of hanging himself, and it had been Alice in Tom's garden eating cucumbers and tomatoes. Stop it, he whispered and focused on the note. It was better spelled and a little better composed, but there was no mistaking the agony in it. October 3, dear Dad. I hope you are alive and get this. Me and Mitch made it okay, but Huey Darden got George. I think he killed him. Me and Mitch just outran faster. I felt like it was my fault, but Mitch, he said, how could you know he was just a phoner like the others? It's not your fault. Daddy, there's worse. Mom is one of them. I saw her with one of the flocks today. Parentheses, that is what they call them, flocks. Close parentheses. She doesn't look as bad as some, but I know if I went out there, she wouldn't even know me and would kill me as soon as look at me. If you see her, don't be fooled. I'm sorry, but it's true. We're going to Cashwack, parentheses, it's up north, close parentheses, tomorrow or next day. Mitch's mom is here. I could kill him. I'm so envious. Daddy, I know you don't have a cell phone, and everyone knows about Cashwack now. It's a safe place. If you get this note, please come get me. I love you with all my heart. Your son, John Gavin Riddell. Even after the news about Sharon, Clay was doing all right until he got to I love you with all my heart. Even then, he might have been all right if not for that capital H. He kissed his 12-year-old son's signature, looked at the bulletin board through eyes that had become untrustworthy. Things doubled, tripled, then shivered completely apart and let out a hoarse cry of pain. Tom and Jordan came running. What, Clay? Tom said. What is it? He saw the sheet of paper, a ruled yellow page from a legal pad, and slipped it out of Clay's hand. He and Jordan scanned it quickly. I'm going to Cashwack, Clay said hoarsely. Clay, that's probably not such a hot idea, Jordan said cautiously, considering, what we did at Gayton Academy. I don't care. I'm going to Cashwack. I'm going to find my son. 6. The refugees who had taken shelter in the Kent Pond Town Hall had left plenty of supplies behind when they decamped, presumably en masse, for TR-90 in Cashwack. Clay, Tom, and Jordan made a meal of canned chicken salad on stale bread with canned fruit salad for dessert. As they were finishing, Tom leaned over to Jordan and murmured something. The boy nodded. 2 of them got up. Would you excuse us for a few minutes, Clay? Jordan and I need to have a little talk. Clay nodded. While they were gone, he cracked another fruit salad cup and read Johnny's letter over for the 9th and 10th times. He was already well on the way to having it memorized. He could remember Alice's death just as clearly, but that now seemed to have happened in another life and to a different version of Clayton Riddell, an earlier draft, as it were. He finished his meal and stowed the letter away just as Tom and Jordan returned from the hall where they had held what he supposed lawyers had called a sidebar, back in the days when there were lawyers. Tom once more had his arm around Jordan's narrow shoulders. Neither of them looked happy, but both looked composed. "Clay," Tom began, "we've talked it over, and you don't want to go with me. Perfectly understandable." Jordan said, "I know he's your son and all, but... and you know he's all I've got left." His mother... Clay laughed a single, humorless bark. His mother, Sharon. It's ironic, really, after all the worry I put in about Johnny getting a blast from that damn little red rattlesnake. If I had to pick one, I would have picked her. There, it was out, like a chunk of meat that had been caught in his throat and was threatening to block his windpipe. And you know how that makes me feel? Like I offered to make a deal with the devil, and the devil actually came through for me. Tom ignored this. When he spoke, he did so carefully, as if he were afraid of setting Clay off like an unexploded landmine. They hate us. They started off hating everyone and progressed to just hating us. Whatever's going on up there in Cashback, if it's their idea, it can't be good. If they're rebooting to some higher level, they may get to a live and let live plane, Clay said. All of this was pointless, surely. They both must see that. He had to go. I doubt it, Jordan said. Remember that stuff about the chute leading to the slaughterhouse? Clay, we're normies, and that's strike one, Tom said. We torched one of their flocks, that's strike two, and strike three combined. Live and let live won't apply to us. Why should it? Jordan added. The Raggedy Man says we're insane. And not to be touched, Clay said, so I should be fine, right? After that, there didn't seem to be any more to say. 7. Tom and Jordan had decided to strike out due west across New Hampshire and into Vermont, putting Cashback equals no foe at their backs and over the horizon as soon as possible. Clay said that Route 11, which made an elbow bend at Kent Pond, would serve them both as a starting point. It'll take me north to 160, he said, and you guys can follow it all the way to Laconia in the middle of New Hampshire. It's not exactly a direct route. But what the hell? You don't exactly have a plane to catch, have you? Jordan dug the heels of his hands into his eyes, rubbed them, and then brushed the hair back from his forehead. A gesture Clay had come to know well. It signaled tiredness and distraction. He would miss it. He would miss Jordan and Tom even more. I wish Alice was still here, Jordan said. She'd talk you out of this. She wouldn't, Clay said. Still, he wished with all his heart that Alice could have had her chance. He wished with all his heart that Alice could have had her chance at a lot of things. 15 was no age at which to die. Your current plans remind me of Act 4 in Julius Caesar, Tom said. In Act 5, everyone falls on their swords. They are now making their way around and sometimes over the stalled cars, jamming Pond Street. The emergency lights of the town hall were slowly receding behind them. Ahead was the dead traffic light marking the center of town, swaying in a slight breeze. Don't be such a fucking pessimist, Clay said. He had promised himself not to become annoyed. He wouldn't part with his friends that way if he could possibly help it, but his resolve was being tried. Sorry, I'm too tired to cheerlead, Tom said. He stopped beside a road sign reading Junction, Route 11, 2 miles. And, may I be frank, too heartsick at losing you. Tom, I'm sorry. If I thought there was one chance in 5 that you had a happy ending in store, how 1 in 50? Well, never mind. Tom shone his flashlight at Jordan. What about you? Any final arguments against this madness? Jordan considered, then shook his head slowly. The head told me something once, he said. Do you want to hear it? Tom made an ironic little salute with his flashlight. The beam skipped off the marquee of the Ioka, which had been showing the new Tom Hanks picture in the pharmacy next door. Have at it. He said the mind can calculate, but the spirit yearns, and the heart knows what the heart knows. Amen, Clay said. He said it very softly. They walked east on Market Street, which was also Route 19A, for 2 miles. After the first mile, the sidewalks ended and the farms began. At the end of the second, there was another dead stoplight and a sign marking the Route 11 junction. There were 3 people sitting bundled up to the neck in sleeping bags at the crossroads. Clay recognized one of them as soon as he put the beam of his flashlight on him. An elderly gent with a long, intelligent face and graying hair pulled back in a ponytail. The Miami Dolphins cap the other man was wearing looked familiar too. Then Tom put his beam on the woman next to Mr. Ponytail and said, "You." Clay couldn't tell if she was wearing a Harley Davidson t-shirt with cut-off sleeves. The sleeping bag was pulled up too high for that, but he knew there was one in the little pile of packs lying near the Route 11 sign if she wasn't. Just as he knew she was pregnant. He had dreamed of these 2 in the Whispering Pines Motel 2 nights before Alice had been killed. He had dreamed of them in the long field, under the lights, standing on the platforms. The man with the gray hair stood up, letting his sleeping bag slither down his body. There were rifles with their gear, but he raised his hands to show they were empty. The woman did the same, and when the sleeping bag dropped to her feet, there was no doubt about her pregnancy. The guy in the Dolphins cap was tall and about 40. He also raised his hands. The 3 of them stood that way for a few seconds in the beams of the flashlights, and then the gray-haired man took a pair of black-rimmed spectacles from the breast pocket of his wrinkled shirt and put them on. His breath puffed out white in the chilly night air, rising to the Route 11 sign, where arrows pointed both west and north. "Well, well," he said, "the president of Harvard said you'd probably come this way, and here you are. Smart fellow, the president of Harvard, although a trifle young for the job, and in my opinion, he could use some plastic surgery before going out to meet with potential big-ticket donors." "Who are you?" Clay asked. "Get that light out of my face, young man, and I'll be happy to tell you." Tom and Jordan lowered their flashlights. Clay also lowered his, but kept one hand on the butt of Beth Nickerson's .45. "I'm Daniel Hartwick of Haverhill, Mass," the gray-haired man said. "The young lady is Denise Link, also of Haverhill. The gentleman on her right is Ray Huizenga of Groveland, a neighboring town." "Meetcha," Ray Huizenga said. He made a little bow that was funny, charming, and awkward. Clay let his hand fall off the butt of his gun. "But our names don't actually matter anymore," Daniel Hartwick said. "What matters is what we are, at least as far as the phoners are concerned." He looked at them gravely. "We are insane, like you." 8. Denise and Ray rustled a small meal over a propane cooker. Parentheses, these canned sausages don't taste too bad if you boil them up hot. Ray said, close parentheses. While they talked, Dan talked mostly. He began by telling them it was 2:20 in the morning, and at 3 he intended to have his brave little band back on the road. He said he wanted to make as many miles as possible before daylight when the phoners started moving around. Because they do not come out at night, he said, we have that much going for us. Later, when their programming is complete or nears completion, they may be able to, but... You agree that's what's happening? Jordan asked. For the first time since Alice had died, he looked engaged. He grasped Dan's arm. You agree that they're rebooting the computers whose hard drives have been wiped? Yes, Dan said, as if this were the most elementary thing in the world. Were you a scientist of some sort? Tom asked. Dan gave him a smile. I was the entire sociology department at Haverhill Arts and Technical, he said. If the president of Harvard has a worse nightmare, that would be me. Dan Hartwick, Denise Link, and Ray Huizenga had destroyed not just one flock, but 2. The first in the back lot of a Haverhill auto junkyard they had stumbled on by accident when there had been half a dozen in their group, and they were trying to find a way out of the city. That had been 2 days after the onset of the pulse, when the phone people had still been the phone crazies, confused and as apt to kill each other as any wandering normies they encountered. That first had been a small flock, only about 75, and they had used gasoline. The second time in Nashua, we used dynamite from a construction site shed, Denise said. We'd lost Charlie, Ralph, and Arthur by then. Ralph and Arthur just took off on their own. Poor old Charlie had a heart attack. Anyhow, Ray knew how to rig the dynamite from when he worked on a road crew. Ray hunkered over his cooker and, stirring the beans next to the sausages, raised his free hand and gave it a flip. After that, Dan Hartwick said, we began to see those Kashwak no-fo signs. Sounded good to us, didn't it, Denny? Yep, Denise said, ollie in for free. We were headed north, same as you, and when we started seeing those signs, we headed north faster. I was the only one who didn't absolutely love the idea, because I lost my husband during the pulse. Those fucks are the reason my kid's gonna grow up not knowing his daddy. She saw Clay wince and said, sorry, we know your boy's gone to Kashwak. Clay gasped. Oh, yes, Dan said, taking a plate as Ray began passing them all around. The president of Harvard knows all, sees all, has dossiers on all, so he'd like us to believe. He gave Jordan a wink, and Jordan actually grinned. Dan talked me around, and he said some terrorist group or maybe just a couple of inspired nutcases working in a garage set this thing off, but no one had any idea it would lead to this. The phoners are just playing out their part in it. They weren't responsible when they were insane, and they aren't really responsible now because they're in the grip of some group imperative, Tom said, like migration. It's a group imperative, but it ain't migration, Ray said, sitting down with his own plate. Dan says it's pure survival. I think he's right. Whatever it is, we gotta find a place to get in out of the rain, you know? The dreams started coming after we burned the first flock, Dan said. Powerful dreams. Ecce homo insanus. Very Harvard. Then, after we bombed the Nashua flock, the president of Harvard showed up in person with about 500 of his closest friends. He ate in quick, neat bites and left a lot of melted boomboxes on your doorstep, Clay said. Some were melted, Denise said. Mostly what we got were bits and pieces. She smiled. It was a thin smile. That was okay. Their taste in music sucks. You call him the president of Harvard. We call him the Raggedy Man, Tom said. He had set his plate aside and opened his pack. He rummaged and brought out the drawing Clay had made on the day the head had been forced to kill himself. Denise's eyes got round. She passed the drawing to Ray Huizenga, who whistled. Dan took it last and looked up at Tom with new respect. You drew this. Tom pointed to Clay. You're very talented, Dan said. I took a course once, Clay said. Draw Fluffy. He turned to Tom, who also kept their maps in his pack. How far is it between Gayton and Nashua? 30 miles tops. Clay nodded and turned back to Dan Hartwick. And did he speak to you? The guy in the red hoodie? Dan looked at Denise, and she looked away. Ray turned back to his little cooker, presumably to shut it down and pack it up, and Clay understood. Which one of you did he speak through? Me. Dan said it was horrible. Have you experienced it? Yeah. You can stop it from happening, but not if you want to know what's on his mind. Does he do it to show how strong he is, do you think? Probably, Dan said, but I don't think that's all. I don't think they can talk. They can vocalize, and I'm sure they think, although not as they did. It would be a terrible mistake to think of them as having human thoughts, but I don't think they can actually speak words. Yet, Jordan said. Yet, Dan agreed. He glanced at his watch, and that prompted Clay to look at his own. It was already 2:45. He told us to go north, Ray said. He told us Kashwek Nofo. He said our flock burning days were over because they were setting up guards. Yes, we saw some in Rochester, Tom said. And you've seen plenty of Kashwek Nofo signs. They nodded. Purely as a sociologist, I began to question those signs, Dan said. Not how they began. I'm sure the first Nofo signs were posted soon after the Pulse by survivors who decided a place like that, where there was no cell phone coverage, would be the best place on earth to go. What I questioned was how the idea and the graffiti could spread so quickly in a catastrophically fragmented society where all normal forms of communication, other than my mouth to your ear, of course, had broken down. The answer seemed clear. Once one admitted that a new form of communication available to only one group had entered the picture. Telepathy. Jordan almost whispered the word them. The phoners. They want us to go north to Kashwek. He turned his frightened eyes to Clay. It really is a frigging slaughterhouse shoot. Clay, you can't go up there. This is all the Raggedy Man's idea. Before Clay could respond, Dan Hartwick was speaking again. He did it with a teacher's natural assumptions. Lecturing was his responsibility, interruption his privilege. I'm afraid I really must hurry this along. Sorry. We have something to show you. Something the president of Harvard has demanded we show you, actually. In your dreams or in person? Tom asked. Our dreams, Denise said quietly. We've only seen him once in person since we burned the flock in Nashua, and that was at a distance. Checking up on us, Ray said. That's what I think. Dan waited with a look of exasperated patience for this exchange to conclude. When it had, he resumed. We were willing to comply since this was on our way. You're going north, then? Clay was the one to interrupt this time. Dan, looking more exasperated now, flicked another quick glance at his watch. If you look at that route sign closely, you'll see that it offers a choice. We intend to go west, not north. Fucking right, Ray muttered. I may be stupid, but I'm not crazy. What I show you will be for our purposes rather than theirs, Dan said. And by the way, talking about the president of Harvard, or the Raggedy Man if you prefer, Showing up in person is probably a mistake, maybe a bad one. He's really no more than a pseudopod that the group mind, the overflock, puts out front to do business with ordinary normies and special insane normies like us. I theorize that there are overflocks all over the world now, and each may have put forward such a pseudopod, maybe even more than one. But don't make the mistake of thinking that when you're talking to your Raggedy Man, that you're talking to an actual man. You're talking to the flock. Why don't you show us what he wants us to see? Clay asked. He had to work to sound calm. His mind was roaring. The one clear thought in it was that if he could get to his son before Johnny got to Cashwack and whatever was going on there, he might still have a chance to save him. Rationality told him that Johnny must be in Cashwack already, but another voice, parentheses, and it wasn't entirely irrational, close parentheses, said something might have held up Johnny and whatever group he was traveling with, or they might have gotten cold feet. It was possible. It was even possible that nothing more sinister than segregation was going on up there in TR90. That the phone people were just creating a res for normies. In the end, he supposed it went back to what Jordan had said, quoting Headmaster Arde. The mind could calculate, but the spirit yearned. Come this way, Dan said. It's not far. He produced a flashlight and began walking up the shoulder of Route 11 North with the beam aimed at his feet. Pardon me if I don't go, Denise said. I've seen. Once was enough. I think this was supposed to please you, in a way, Dan said. Of course, it was also supposed to underline the point, to my little group as well as yours, that the phoners are now the ones with the power, and they are to be obeyed. He stopped. Here we are in this particular sleepogram. The president of Harvard made very sure we all saw the dogs so we couldn't get the wrong house. The flashlight beam nailed a roadside mailbox with a collie painted on the side. I'm sorry Jordan has to see this, but it's probably best that you know what you're dealing with. He raised his flashlight higher. Ray joined his beam to Dan's. They lit up the front of a modest one-story wooden house, sitting neatly on a postage stamp of lawn. Gunnar had been crucified between the living room window and the front door. He was naked except for a pair of blood-stained Joe boxers. Nails big enough to be rail spikes jutted from his hands, feet, forearms, and knees. Maybe they were rail spikes, Clay thought. Sitting splay-legged at Gunner's feet was Harold. Like Alice when they met her, Harold was wearing a bib of blood, but his hadn't come from his nose. The wedge of glass he'd used to cut his throat after crucifying his running buddy still twinkled in one hand. Hung around Gunner's neck on a loop of string was a piece of cardboard with 3 words scrawled on it in dark capital letters. Justitia est commoditum. JUSTITIA EST COMMODATUM.